Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm a few seconds late because it told me that live streaming isn't available. I don't know, it's never happened before. It's first time for everything. So welcome back. If you're a regular on my lives, and if not, if you're new here, my name is Amanda. I'm broadcasting from Italy, and tonight we're going to talk about how difficult it is to be a full-time resident in Italy or not. It's a question that gets asked of me. But tonight I'm really going to just tell you the story of how I came to live in Italy, how I came to be in Italy all those years ago. So sit back, relax, get yourself a glass of wine or a cup of tea. I've got a glass of water. Should really be champagne. But anyway, so yeah, let's talk about. People always go on about they'd really love to live in Italy and they can't see how any other place would meet the dream that Italy does. And so Italy has always been super popular. Now I've covered lots of videos and I'll put the whole playlist up there when I'm done, so you can choose through them as to what you want to look at, what you want to dive into in a more deep way. But tonight I'm just going to tell the story of how I came to live in Italy in 2002. So if you come in, won't you do me a favor and go down to the chat box, put your name in and where you're joining us from. It's nice for me to see who joins us. People join from all over the world. I did publicize that I was coming on at 8:30 on Sunday, our regular time. So let's get straight to it. And don't forget to like the video up there. Lots of people say to me afterwards, oh, I just forget. Please go and like it. Makes a huge difference. And if you're brand new here, just stick around and I hope you enjoy the evening. If you're regular, you should have subscribed by now. So let's get into it. How did I come to be in Italy? The country that I'm now a citizen of, that I live in. There we are. Fratelli Italia. There we are. So lots and lots of years ago in 2002, I was living in Edinburgh, which is in Scotland, as you know, and it was absolutely freezing. It was Hogmanay, which for those who don't know is the period between Christmas and New Year's Eve. And it was particularly freezing. And I remember friends had invited me to go to a Hogmanay party in Edinburgh, which was lovely. Hogmanay's gorgeous in Edinburgh. Scotland's one of my favorite countries, and I visit quite often now. Anyway, I was living there in the apartment of a friend who had gone overseas somewhere. And yeah, so I took this apartment for a few months. And it was absolutely freezing. There was black ice everywhere. And yes, I woke up one morning and there was this advert in a magazine called The Lady. For those of you who've been around a while, it was a magazine published out of London. It's not published anymore. This is before the internet, what it is today. There was just email. There wasn't social media, and there certainly wasn't YouTube. But anyway, there was an advert in this magazine, The Lady, and basically what it said was, come to Tuscany, sun, summer, whatever, and you can fly in here, and we need somebody to come and teach our two children how to speak English for a few weeks. So I thought, oh, this sounds quite interesting. So it sounded absolutely gorgeous. It was in a beautiful abbey in Tuscany, in one of the most beautiful areas near Montevacchi in Tuscany, and a top wine producer. And it was just unbelievable. Anyway, I thought, okay, so I emailed the email address they had, and I said I was vaguely interested. I said, I wasn't a qualified teacher. I was actually an economist and investment person, which is what I'd done in my previous life before, all over Europe, out of London and from Cape Town, where I was based at the time. So anyway, I sent this thing off. It came back and they phoned me that evening and they said, do you want to come? They explained it all. They were Italians who spoke very little English. I couldn't speak a word of Italian. Anyway, long story short, a couple of weeks later, I got on the plane and I flew out there. And after I looked after these two quite small children and did all the cooking, which I've always loved. I've always loved cooking and really thoroughly enjoyed that. And the fact that these Italians trusted me to cook. I knew all their recipes because I'd been cooking Italian food for years, even before I lived here. And it was really pleasant and lovely. And came the end of the 3 weeks, they gave me my money in my hand. On the weekend, I used their car and I drove out to Cortona, which is famous for Under the Tuscan Sun, and all these amazing places. And remember, this was 2002, very early 2002. So, Italy was a different place. Tuscany was a different place. There were very few foreigners around. There wasn't all the expats buying up houses as they are now. Anyway, I drove and I had all these adventures. I went down to Pisa. I went to Lucca to check out Lucca. Lucca, the wonderful walled city in Tuscany, which so many of you, I'm sure, have heard about and know and dream about living in. Anyway, long story short, the 3 weeks came to an end and they said, well, what do you want to do? Do you want us to get you a ticket to fly you home? And I said, no, would you rather give me the money? I'm going to take a train. I'm going to go north and I'm going to explore a little bit. And that's exactly what I did. I went north. I went up and explored the lake area. I'd been to Venice many times, but I explored a little bit. And in the end, I thought, you know what? I'm going to head back to Lucca and I'm going to spend a couple of weeks in Lucca because I loved it when I was there. And yeah, I'm a free agent. I've got my money in my bag from this 3-week stint that I did. I think it was more like 4 weeks. And yeah, and so I literally headed to Lucca. And within about 3 days of being in Lucca, I picked up a local little leaflet magazine in Lucca, in this beautiful city, and got offered a job to go and run a villa on the way to Florence, looking over the hills of Florence, in this beautiful farm that had 2 villas. And the owner, Mark, was in the British Army. He was part of the Queen's Guard. He asked me if I'd come and run it because he had guests coming from all over Europe. They needed somebody who spoke English. And I needed to manage all the Italian staff. That was the difficult part. I couldn't speak a word of Italian. But anyway, so I said, absolutely. He met me at the station. He drove me up. I didn't have a car. I took the train from Lucca to Pistoia and then towards Bacco, where this farm was. And it was an olive farm and also grew some grapes. And yeah, it was amazing. And so started my sojourn in Italy. And literally the first day, I couldn't speak a word of Italian, had to organize the staff. I think at the end of the day, they just went home and laughed themselves silly because I literally just had to use hand gestures and whatever. And yeah, I survived the first week and whatever. And that whole season was lovely. I cooked for these groups of people who came to the villa, made sure the swimming pool was all organized, made sure the whole farm ran. And Mark's mum was quite elderly, and so she needed some company every now and then. So I would go up to the villa. It was really lovely. And it was a different time, different era. And there was a tiny cottage that I had that looked straight onto Florence. It was so romantic and so gorgeous. And then on the weekends, I would go to Lucca and look around, and I started to realize that I really wanted to be in Lucca, and that this sabbatical that I thought about, I didn't want to go back to Edinburgh and go back into investments and finance. I really wanted to see if I could stay in Lucca, and so that's what I did. I literally, you know what they say, when you don't know what you're getting into, yeah, it's fine. You know, I was so brave, so courageous, because I had no clue what was in front of me, or how challenging it would be, or anything. I had an EU passport, a British passport. Obviously, this was before Britain left the EU. And yeah, the world was my oyster. I started working regularly, I think 3 out of 4 days for Mark up at the villa. And then I would do some other stuff at other villas around Lucca. And eventually went on to get a little apartment in Lucca. And it was such fun because it was on Via Falungo, which is the main street of Lucca, if you've ever been to Lucca. And on a Sunday, all the well-dressed Florentines and the Pisani and everybody from around Tuscany and the Lucchese, of course, come all dressed up in their finery on Sunday and go up and down doing the passeggiata, up and down the beautiful streets of Lucca. And I was no different. I just thought this was the best thing ever. There was the lovely walled ramparts where we walked in the evening, and I quickly made friends with a group of 4 girls who we met one day because there was a language school in Lucca, teaching Italian to foreigners. And there was a guy I'll never forget, Massimo, who ran the whole thing. He was the head of studies. He was everything. He took the bookings. And I mean, he had a life of Riley because, long story short, he was basically in charge of, there was mostly women. It was mostly women who came to Lucca to study. I didn't meet any men in this language school in the time that I was going. But I never actually enrolled there because I never had the money. I mean, the money that I was earning from working up at the villa didn't really even cover my rent, because getting a rent in a place like Lucca, that was really something. But anyway, we got together, us 4 girls. There was Elsa, who was German and working for Ramazzotti, the Italian liqueur brand. She had a car, so that was great. It was Ramazzotti written all over it, so very popular. And then Dina, who was from California, me and Grazia, and we all got together and we used to go out everywhere. On the weekends, we used to drive to the Cinque Terre. We had an absolute ball. It was so fun and so nice. And yeah, so we all just stuck together. None of us could speak a word of Italian. I had just learned snatches of Italian, just to greet people and talk the basics, because I was working with the whole Italian staff who I was supposed to be managing, who couldn't really understand a word I said, and vice versa. Anyway, but I was keen. I was, at night I'd have my little notebook and I'd be writing down every word that I could think of, and then the corresponding Italian. So slowly, I was able to just sort of string a few words together. But our weekends were such fun. It was such a carefree time. I was 42. So although when I first arrived there, I'd had a whole life before that. My 2 children were studying, or one was studying and one was finished studying already, because I had my children young. But that's another part of my life, which I'll cover in another session. This is the Italian part that we're covering today. And so, yeah, I thought 42, I thought my life was pretty much, I was in the middle of it. So now when I look at 42-year-olds, I mean, they're young. It's really the prime of your life and everything's hunky-dory. But anyway, so, yeah. and we went. Oh, we had an absolute ball. The girls were all sort of in their late, sort of late 20s, early 30s. So I was sort of 8 or 10 years older than them, but we had such an amazing time. Anyway, so I started living in Lucca, and this wonderful city with the amphitheater. And if you don't know anything about Lucca, I suggest you put it into Google and go and have a look. Those of you who live in Lucca or around Lucca will know all about it. And yeah, and I would wake up in the morning, go and have a cappuccino and a beautiful brioche, and got to know some of the shopkeepers up and down. And then there was a market once a week. And the restaurants then were really sort of, all trattoria, not as sophisticated as they now are, because tourism hadn't exploded there. There weren't so many Americans and English homeowners who'd bought up the properties. It was all Italian. And I quickly made friends with a lovely couple. She was Lebanese and she'd married him. Giovanni, is Lucchese, and they became fast friends. And in fact, later on, they came to my wedding, and we've been friends forever. But they were my first entry, and I remember them saying to me when I said I wanted to get a flat in Lucca and I wanted to, put down residence and get everything done. They said to me, do not ever get in regola. In regola means, properly verified, properly registered in the comune with all the paper and everything. They said, don't do it, you'll live to regret it. But I never listened. And I'm still thinking on words that have been said to me over the past 22 years by Italians on what I should never have done. But, as they say, ignorance is bliss. And I was, definitely not clued up as to how I should or shouldn't be registering. Anyway, with all this lovely will and all this happiness and this gorgeous town I was now living in, I heard that there was an apartment in Via Falunga on the 5th floor. It's about as high as it goes in Lucca. Most of them are 4 floors, and then this was a sort of mansarda, the attico, up the top. And it had this tiny winding staircase that you had to go up and down. There was no lift, which is quite usual in buildings in ancient cities like Lucca and many Italian cities. Anyway, I went to see this landlord shaking because I literally just had the deposit. That's all I had. I had 500 euro that saved up. And that was the deposit in the first month rent. Things have changed a lot since then. Now you couldn't even you probably could get 2 nights in Lucca for 500 euro. But anyway, I was so excited. I went to see him and he said, yeah, they've just moved out. He had students in there. I found out later that he would sort of have these students coming and they would stay for a few months, foreigners, and then they'd go. It was a foreign contract. It wasn't a proper Italian contract, but I was so delighted. Anyway, at the end of this day, I realized that I needed to have a flatmate because, I needed a flatmate because there's no way I was going to cover all these expenses myself. But anyway, I managed to secure the thing. I put down this deposit. He said, that's fine, whatever. How many of you are there going to be? So I said, well, I think 2. So he said, well, you can't go above, 3 because before they crammed in 5 in there. And I said, no, I definitely wouldn't have 5 people. Anyway, so I literally ran downstairs afterwards crying with excitement. I was so happy that I had my dream apartment in Lucca. Winter was coming and I'd done the whole season at the villa and they were generally closed for bookings. So, Mark had said to me, well, I don't really want to pay you all the way through winter when there's no bookings, but if you can come once a week, make sure the staff are managing everything, that would be okay. But I was not going to survive on one payment a week, obviously. Anyway, so I knew I had to get going and do something else. But anyway, so I had this beautiful apartment in Lucca. And oh, it was lovely. I had that key and I went downstairs. And when I go back now and look at Lucca, where the beautiful Cathedral of San Frediano, if you know Lucca, it was literally opposite the piazza. So I looked straight onto the piazza on Via Fulungo. And there was a leather shop downstairs, I remember. Fiorentino, I think it was called, and all these gorgeous little restaurants. There was a beautiful bar opposite where we all used to go. And me and the girls went regularly there. Anyway, this one particular day, the girls had drifted off. They all had something to do. And I hung around, and there was a particular guy called Marco who sort of expressed an interest. And we chatted happily. He could speak English. He'd lived in Los Angeles with his uncle for a few years and then come back to Lucca. And he could talk, he could talk fair English, heavily accented. But I was delighted because I wasn't able yet to have a proper Italian conversation. I could get by, but I couldn't understand jokes and nuances and all of that. That took a while longer. Anyway, Marco, after we'd had a few, nobody in Italy really drinks to excess. It's unlike anywhere else in the world where, you might have 4 glasses of wine or, I don't know, 4 beers or whatever. We were both, we just had an aperitivo. It was lovely. And we were just perfect. So I said to him, I think I better get going because, I've got to get back. And he said, okay, well, I'll walk you home. So I said, oh, that's lovely. I loved the gentlemanliness of him walking me home. And he really was quite fanciable. I mean, he really was my type. And I thought, oh, he's quite a dish. I think he was about a few years younger than me, maybe. He's sort of maybe 40 or just slightly older. He was a pilot and then I'm pilot. Anyway, Mark was walking me home, right? So we get to our apartment, my apartment, where the little door goes up the side next to this Florentine leather shop. And there's the outside door that you push the wooden door to go in and the stairs go up. And he looks at me and he's holding my bag of groceries because I've got a big bag of groceries. Because when you came downstairs, you tried to do the maximum you could because, I had olive oil in the grocery bag. I had water because you had to carry all your water up. We would fill it from the lovely spring that is available all over the place. There's fountains all over Lucca and you'd always fill up water. We never came down the stairs and went up without filling up with water. So that was one less trip that you had to do up and down the stairs. Anyway, so as we start going up the stairs, we're in the door now and we're going up these very narrow stairs with him in this shopping. He says to me, he said, are you on the 5th floor? And I said, yeah. I didn't want to disappoint him too much because you could see he had a long day. 5 floors of carrying these groceries wasn't his idea of a hot date. But anyway, so we start going up and we're on the 4th floor. And I said, no, it's one more. And he said, oh, I know. I said, how do you know? He said, I used to date a girl that lived in that apartment on the mansard on the 5th floor, and I had to break up with her because I couldn't go up and down the stairs anymore. And I said, what, Marco, really? I thought it was hilarious. It was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. But he said, yes, no, I broke up with her because I couldn't stand coming up and down the stairs anymore. And that was my first introduction to Italian laziness. I just thought, my goodness. So I said to him, well, I guess that's the end of the date then if you're not going to come up to the 5th floor anymore. So he said, yeah, well, I'll see. We had a little chat, we had a good laugh, and off Marco went. But I'll never forget that. It was just that, all he was thinking about as he was climbing those 4 stairs with the groceries was, I'm not going to do this. This is the fifth floor. The fifth floor, Lucca, doesn't get any higher than that. It's the fourth floor and then the attic above that. And he literally said he broke up with this girl that he was dating because he didn't want to walk up five flights of stairs with her water and her groceries. Anyway, it was hilarious. And so that was the end of Marco. We stayed friends through the years. I still bump into him when I'm in Lucca. I think he's been married 4 times since then and divorced 4 times. But anyway, that was my introduction to Italian dating. And I was so delighted with my apartment in Lucca. I can see some people are jumping on, and let me see who's here. I can't see. This is too small. Hi, loving the content. Oh, thank you, Diablo. Tell me where you're joining from. Anyway, so don't forget to like the video, you guys. When you come in, like the video. So anyway, here I am. I've got this beautiful apartment in Lucca in Tuscany. And yes, and we had so many adventures with the girls. We used to go to the Cinque Terre. Sometimes we used to go to Florence. But during this time, when I was going back and forth to the villa on the way to Florence in Pistoia, near Bacale, near Lamperecchio, for those of you who know the area very well, to the olive farm, I one day met a man called Nick, and started this friendship with Nick, who was living in Pisa, Livorno, and used to come out and visit me on the farm where I was living in the cottage. And then when I moved to Lucca, it was easier because it was even closer. And so he worked a week, and then on the weekends he would come, and I would take him all around Lucca, introduce him to Lucca, show him all around Lucca. And so we started going out, and that was my first sort of dating experience in Italy. And yeah, and it was exciting because Lucca had become my city, and I knew a bit of it, and I'd made some local friends, and we had the girls. And in fact, one night, just soon after I met him, we were all going to Viareggio, to this dancing club, this nightclub, which is down on the beach. And we all went, and we all piled into his car. We all went together because he was going to drive us. Normally, Elsa would come with us, and we'd go in the Ramazzotti van. But off we went, and yeah, we went to this amazing nightclub. I don't think I've been to a nightclub, or certainly not in Viareggio. I've been back to Viareggio for various events and to spend time on the beach and to see friends. But this evening was really amazing, and we danced, and we were all a group together. And then basically, he drove us back to Lucca, where Dina was living, and we all stayed the night in her little house, which is out in the countryside, just outside of the walls of Lucca. And yeah, we used to have such amazing times. Go towards Florence, sometimes go towards Pisa. Anyway, I had this new apartment, and I remember I invited him over for something to eat. I did, aperitivi, invited some of the friends. And it was so lovely in Lucca, walking down the Fosso and going to get my water from the fountain. And those days in Lucca will always stay with me, because I got lost so many times, because Lucca has these streets that lead. They're obviously not straight on a grid. No Italian cities are, but they lead towards the northern gate, which is Santa Maria, the bottom gate, which went to the station. And quite often I'd find myself in the wrong direction. So we walked ourselves crazy. I mean, I don't know. In those days, I think I walked 20 kilometers every day. And then on the edge of the walled ramparts of Lucca, there's the moat. It's an ancient city, and so it had a moat around it for protection. But yeah, we used to go to Pisa, to the beach. Yeah, we had such an amazing time, and it was such a fantastic period of my life in Italy at the beginning, and I just loved Lucca. I loved Lucca to bits. Anyway, we continued to have this amazing time, and I kept recording and remembering my dear friend Giovanni, who said to me right from the beginning, he had 5 children, by the way. They had the last one while I was living in Lucca. And his Lebanese wife, who he married very young, and she'd been living in Italy since. And they all said to me, do not register for residence. Do not be in regular. Don't do it. And anyway, I didn't listen to them. I did register, became a resident, and then, got offered various villa opportunities, cooking, because I had worked as a chef in the past, cooking for various celebrities, running various villas. It was lovely. It was really a lovely, lovely time. Anyway, during this time, a dear friend who had her little house down by the river, by the Serchio River in Lucca, offered me to look after her house while she went away back to the States for a few months. So I stayed there. And while I was there, Nick used to come every weekend from Livorno, where he was with his parents. He was recently divorced. Well, separated, because in Italy, getting divorced takes much longer. First, you have to legally separate, then you get divorced. And yeah, so one day he literally came and said, "Oh, my job has changed, and I've been offered something in Milan." So I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And he said to me, by now we were, together, and I was quite smitten. And he said to me, "Shall we go? Would you come with me to Milan?" And all things considered, if this was maybe in another stage of my life, I might be less foolhardy, and I might have said, "Well, we're not married, we're not really legally together. So, moving to Milan's a big step." But anyway, in for a penny, in for a pound, we jumped in together, and I moved from Lucca after those first initial 2 years, which I loved so much, and moved to Milan. And arrived in Milan end of 2003, beginning of 2004, got a tiny apartment of a friend, and started teaching English to managers in Milan. And so began the Lombardia part of my life. And 20 years of every area of Milan, and starting my business in Milan, and doing everything in Milan, and buying a house and renovating a house in Lake Como, because I didn't want to live in the center of Milan. At the time, I wanted to be out toward Lake Como, so that's what I did. But I'm going to have to do this in bite-sized pieces, because there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to do. And during this time, I learned how many pieces of paper you need in Italy to function on any level. So once I got to Milan and had proper contracts for work, and had to sign a contract for our very first apartment that we got, it was all, I learned very quickly. By now I could speak passable Italian. It took me about 2 years to learn passable Italian. And just thinking back, in that lovely first initial stage, you don't really understand the jokes that are being said and the nuances of Italian language. Now I do. Now I can have a laugh and a discussion with 10 Italians, and I'm part of it. And, they consider me Italian. I am Italian. I'm an Italian citizen now. But at the time, you always feel like you really can't participate, and that your character and your personality is a little bit different in a different language. Those of you who've learned another language and lived in another culture from your own, will understand. You kind of develop two different entities, two different personalities, because one of the things I realized was I wasn't funny in Italian, or certainly not as funny as as my friends received me in my own home language, English. And yeah, and that maybe I came across a little bit more serious in Italian than I am in my natural language. And but it was really quite a challenge, and I look back at that time and the huge barriers I overcame to jump into Lucca, to a new culture, to find a job, and how it all unfolded. And in the end, Elsa went back to America, so she gave up her little house. I had my weekend house there that I went up and down often on the weekends back to Lucca, because my dear friend had left me her house while she was in the States to sort of look over. So, and of course, Nick's parents were in between Pisa and Livorno, so we used to come down to his parents. But one of the things I will tell you of my first Christmas in Italy, my very first Christmas. I've always loved Christmas. I'm Christmas mad. My birthday's on Christmas Eve, so it's always been a thing where I love Christmas. Anyway, it was the first Christmas. I had the little apartment in Lucca, and I decorated it all. I invited friends over for drinks on Christmas Eve. It was all lovely. And then Nick, who, him and I had just recently started seeing each other, he said to me on Christmas Day, will you be here? I said, yes. My friends were mostly joining their families, my Italian friends. So he said, well, will you come to my parents for Christmas Day? And I said, yeah, that would be amazing. I don't know anything about Natale. I mean, but I was so enchanted by this whole thing. And Lucca is so beautiful at Christmas. So on the 8th of December, which is the Ascension of Maria, I think one of the things that astounded me the most about this beautiful Italian culture that I'd fallen in love with was that, and I've seen them do it a few times since, that on the 8th, I think it's the 8th of December, correct me if I'm wrong, the firemen would come, and so there was a statue of Maria on the end of our road near the top of the Fosso. And the Fosso is the canal that runs where the overflow of the fountains of the water go down back toward the moat. And there was a huge statue of Maria. Maria is very venerated. There's so many beautiful churches in Lucca. If you haven't been, you need to go. But anyway, Maria was up there with her halo of stars. And I always used to look at her because she was a point in which all the roads converged onto her. And that's how we didn't get lost. We looked for Maria. And the firemen would come and they would put their huge ladder up and then take this enormous bunch of 20 red roses, or probably more than 20, maybe 24 red roses, and place them in her arms for her special day. I just thought it was the most enchanting, beautiful thing I'd ever seen. So this was the atmosphere around Christmas. All the lights were in Lucca. Every church had the little nativity. We were going back and forth to Florence to buy the little nativity pieces because I started my own nativity in my little apartment. And in this atmosphere, my first Christmas, friends that had come to visit me had given me a huge bouquet of flowers. Those were all up in my new little apartment. It was just lovely. And yeah, so we exchanged gifts on the morning of Christmas, and then we drove to Nick's parents, who I'd never met, never seen. And I arrived, I remember I had a red velvet dress. It was quite beautiful and fitted, and it had embroidery here. I was super young and slim, maybe a bit slimmer than I am now. But anyway, And I remember, and these beautiful earrings that he had given me for Christmas, which were like garnets, and it was really nice. And my hair was long and dark. I want to show you what I looked like in those days. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, because I don't know how this camera works. Let's see. Can you see that? Tell me. That was me in those days. It was a wedding we went to. My hair was long and dark in those days. So anyway, I don't know if that's even going to be a good idea for you to see. So there we were. So yes, so I was super excited, and we arrived at his parents, took some gifts and lovely. The thing is, in Italy at Christmas, everything, the champagne all gets ribbons on it. We had, all sorts of confectionery and ribbons, and we arrived with all these gifts, beautiful big boxes of panettone with beautiful ribbons. The shops in Lucca at Christmas are just a joy. So I was completely enchanted. Arrived there, and yes, and they are Neapolitan. His parents are Neapolitan from Napoli. They've lived in Lucca, or certainly for the 30 years before I came on the scene. And so we had this amazing, huge lunch. I had never eaten with Neapolitan people before for Christmas. It was about 20 courses. The food just kept coming. And for those of you who know and have lived there, you only eat fish in a Neapolitan house at Christmas. They don't eat meat. It's normally Vigilia, which is the night before, but even on Christmas Day, they ate fish. So we would start with, brodo with fish, and then a pasta with fish, and then other thing, just dishes and dishes and dishes of amazing fish, seafood, then a whole branzino. It just went on and on and on. And then all the traditional Neapolitan desserts like strufoli, pastiera, and on and on and on. Literally, I don't think I've ever eaten so much in my entire life. Never thought I'd be able to get it from the table. And I had this quite fitted red velvet dress. And luckily, it had a sort of peplum skirt, so I could breathe slightly. And then, we went for a walk after lunch and down to the little church in the village. It was so romantic and so beautiful. And I was completely enchanted with Tuscany. I had my own Tuscan life. I just loved it. And yeah. And so that was my first Christmas in Lucca. So I guess, I don't know who's joined us. I'm going to have a little look. And I don't know if any of you have sent questions. Loving the content. I'm following here from Brazil. Oh, how wonderful. He says, I will share your channel with all my friends around the world. Please do. Kevin Denham. Hi, I'm currently in the UK, but I've had a holiday home in Abruzzo for 16 years. I absolutely love the way in which you speak so eloquently and without a script. How lovely. What a gorgeous compliment. Yeah, I never use a script. I decided to do lives years ago because I tried doing videos, and there are some videos of my channel, of my town, my house when I renovated it. I just find that I much prefer live. I did a live for years when I was reviewing perfume, and we used to have people from all over the world. So thank you. We've got 2 guys tonight. That's lovely. And don't forget to like the video, guys, if you did enjoy it. Yeah, so this little period of my life, and anyway, we were now an item, Nick and I. That was my first Christmas. And then, of course, we would go down every year when we were living in the north. We would go down every year for Christmas there. Sometimes go down on Christmas Eve, so we would have proper Vigilia, and sometimes we would go down on Christmas Day. But through the years, I have always kept that contact with Lucca because it was my hometown. It became my hometown in Italy. And 20 years later, it still feels that way. I've been down to Lucca continuously and always kept in touch with it, still have great friends there. And anyway, so we lived in the province of Como, Lake Como, which our village, to go into Milan, where I worked for all these years, I know every little corner of Milan, and that's a whole nother vlog we'll do, of the amazing times, amazing friends, amazing restaurants, amazing places. People underestimate Milan. It has so many beautiful corners. But before that, I had to do all this paperwork. I had to become irregular. I had to become an employed person in Italy. And that's what this is about. It's pretty difficult. And I can't imagine how difficult it would have been if I couldn't speak Italian. I speak fluent Italian now. And I think it took me about 2 years to get workable Italian where I could sort of respond to somebody and respond to questions and ask questions. So I never went to Italian school. And that's a question people often ask me. I never had the money. In the beginning, I never had the money. And even when I had the money, I just found that the easiest way to learn it was to speak it. And I learned my Italian on the street. And I think it served me very well because Italian friends of mine tell me that my accent is excellent. And sometimes on the phone, people think I'm Italian if they don't see me. Sometimes people think I'm Italian anyway because they just assume I am Italian because I have dark hair. But my dark hair, which is all natural, by the way, I don't dye it, and my coloring comes from my French great-grandparents. So what is this telling me? I don't know what it's telling me. So how are we doing for time? Okay, I can't see. Okay, so we're good. Okay, so what I wanted to say was that the paperwork, the registering for things in Italy is ball breaking, excuse the French, but I don't know how any other way to describe to you what you need to do to get every piece of paper that you needed. By now, I've lived in Italy long enough that I love the culture. Like everyone else, I have moments where I'm tearing my hair out. But I have found, if I look back over the years, all the people I've collaborated with, worked with, gone on holiday with, had dinner with, invited to my house regularly for Christmas, I have to say that the ones that are always sort of resistant to learning the language and always see themselves as expats never really settle. And quite often with a couple, I find that maybe the man can't settle or the woman can't settle. One of them isn't on the same page as the other in terms of Italy and its joys and its drawbacks, because there are drawbacks, obviously. I think one of the biggest challenges I've seen with friends that have helped over the years with the Italian residents is that work is extremely complicated here. Before I ever came to Italy, when I was living in South Africa in Cape Town, a friend of mine, Anthony, whose mother was Italian, and went on to marry an Italian. They had a home in Rome, a house in Rome that he inherited. And he said, you cannot work in Italy, it's impossible. And I was talking to you before about all the advice that was given to me over the years, which I ignored because I was convinced that I wanted to be here. And somehow it's worked out. There's been a lot of very challenging moments. This edition, I'm not going to talk about what it costs to retire here, what it means to retire here, just enough to say so many people love Italy, so many people want to come here, so many people want to retire, whatever the negatives are, whatever the drawbacks are, whatever the taxability is, it doesn't matter. You either love it or you don't. And if you love it and you want to get a house here, I'm more than willing to help with any questions. I have put down in the description box my website. You can go there, you can You can have a free call with me and ask if you just need some quick questions or you need someone to look at some houses for you. So I started enabling people to move to Italy about maybe 18 years ago, and it goes on. And I have my little company Relocate to Europe now, and I help people with Italy and France and Portugal, the countries I know best, and Spain. And yeah, lived in Portugal for a couple of years, but always kept the house in Italy. Anyway, to wrap this up in a way into a bite-sized piece, I gave you that first little taste of my life there. But for the last, let's say 2012, so a bit like maybe 13, 14 years, maybe, I've been single because eventually got married in Italy, got married in Lucca, went down to Lucca to get married. It was a very romantic wedding. But then we divorced. It was a very, very difficult period for me because I asked myself the question, should I go back? Should I leave Italy? It was super complicated. At that time, I hadn't naturalized yet. I hadn't become an Italian citizen. Dealing with the courts in Italy and the marriage breakdown and all the stuff I had to deal with was super difficult, especially out of your own culture. And yeah, and I started again. The house, I stayed in the house for many years because I loved having the fireplace. We put a wood burner in there. We had renovated it. So I stayed in the house. He moved on. And yes, it was really hard. It was really hard dealing with that thing that I was far from my family. I was far from my childhood friends, the culture I'd grown up with, and dealing with this situation that I had to deal with this really complicated relationship, and the fallout of it. But, slowly, day by day, I went back, saw my family and said, I think I'd like to stay in Italy and see how it goes. And I did. And I'm now in a gorgeous apartment, which 2 years ago, I decided to move from Lake Como to Lega Maggiore, an area I'd come to a lot. I'm in the most beautiful town. You can go and have a look at some of my shorts. I'll be putting some more shorts up this week just to show you a bit of the town, because here on the live, you don't get to see the town. But, when I go for a walk in the evening, as I did this evening with all the sailboats out and these magnificent mountains, and I swim every day in summer, and I walk in the forest, and I've got everything, and I've got this sophisticated, beautiful shopping area with cobbled streets. It's just amazing. And I feel like a lottery winner. There have been times where I've torn my hair out with work situations and earning situations and trying to calculate if I would be able to get old here and retire here, and all the difficult questions we ask ourselves as we get a little bit older. But on days like today, and most days, I have to say, I walk along the cobbled streets and go down along the lake and watch the little boats come in. And it is so magnificent and so beautiful. The food is so gorgeous in Italy. I'm able to buy, although it's got more expensive over the years, and Italy is by no means cheap anymore. I mean, obviously, if you live right down in the south and you live quite a frugal life, you can. But here in the north, but everything I want to do is here, and I can travel easily. I traveled to France this summer. I have an amazing train, a fast-speed train that can go into Switzerland. I go into Milan in an hour to see friends or to have lunch or to catch up. And there's Fashion Week and Design Week in Milan. So I'm really not short of any anything you could desire. But it doesn't mean, like a typical human being, I don't sometimes think, well, maybe I could do better or whatever. But I have to say, walking along, there's all the autumn leaves at the moment, the colors are all turning, and the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful city. And the squares and the piazzas and all the little traditions that have become part of me. And I have my own Italian Christmas, and I have my own Italian friends to come and have Christmas at my house. I've got a big table. There's normally about 14 of us. I just absolutely love it, to be honest. And yeah, it's taken an enormous amount of grit and determination to not give up when we were renovating the house. Just getting any piece of paper that you need in Italy is a nightmare. The bureaucracy is horrendous. I'm not going to lie to you. But if you can wrap your head around learning the language, if you can wrap your head around maybe just trying to take the good of Italian culture, the kindness of the people. Obviously, there's some of them that are awful. The driving in Italy is horrendous. I mean, it's one of the things I don't think I'll ever get used to. Just this morning, while I was crossing the pedestrian stripes, crossing the road, I nearly got run over because Italians, when they're in their cars, they just, that's it. It's like their body, and they just go. And you're supposed to just sort of meld into whatever. When I'm driving with my friends, and they screech up to the pedestrian crossing and they don't stop, and they just about kill the other person, I have to bite my tongue because I want to say to them, how can you drive so inconsiderately? How can you not consider the poor person who's trying to cross the street? Sometimes it's an old lady or an old man who's hobbling along with their shopping. It's quite, so there are these things. There really are these things. And sometimes you'll go into a shop and they'll be quite rude to you because they can hear you're not Italian. And I've been with friends over the years, and even my children who come as adults for Christmas times and other times, and we'll go into a shop and you get treated a little bit roughly. But all things considered, would I have done it any differently? I don't think so, because I'm now at a stage when I see the Italian flag, when I hear the Italian anthem, when I voted for the very first time. I had just become a new Italian citizen and I voted. We have a woman as a prime minister in Italy, and I think she's doing quite a good job compared to what happened before her, how many men we had going through parliament in Italy. I live in peace. I live in a country in which the food is amazing. As long as you have enough money. So if you're thinking of coming here to work, I think you need to really look at that carefully, because it ain't easy. The job market is protected. But as I always say in my videos, if you're coming here to retire and you have a passive income, you can do it. It's doable. It really is doable. But it takes a lot of grit. It takes a lot of determination, and you can't give up at the first hurdle, because there will be tons of hurdles. There'll be hurdles when you do a quote on your house because you're ordering doors or windows, and it all goes pear-shaped and the contractor runs away. But yeah, does this only happen in Italy? I don't know. It probably happens in other countries too. I'm sure it does. But, there are moments when I've had to help friends who are literally saying, okay, I have to leave. I can't take it anymore. And the ones that have left are normally the ones who maybe had unfair expectations, that even though they said they weren't coming here to work, they tried to work and they tried to do whatever. Look, I came here a long time ago, 2002. So I've worked for the last 22 years. But it ain't easy, and it's always a compromise. And I'm sure if I was living somewhere else, I could have earned 5 times as much, but maybe I would have had a completely different life. So anyway, I don't want to get too philosophical on you, But yes, it's quite complicated. But if you're thinking of retiring to Italy, if you're thinking that you would like to live in a lovely town, either a city or one of the other cities in the north or even down in the south, I've traveled to the south often. I've done every corner of Italy. I've been to Venice multiple times, taken hundreds of people to Venice. I've been all over this country. I know it upside down. So I can genuinely say, as an Italian citizen, that when people criticize Italy now, I feel like I have to protect her, just like you do if somebody criticizes your family or whatever. I feel I have to protect her, even though at times Italy drives me to insanity. But would I have these problems in another country? I don't know. I've lived in Switzerland. It was interesting, but I had different problems. Switzerland is very rule based, and living in Portugal for the 2 years on and off. Yeah, it was interesting and it was lovely. But anyway, tonight we're just talking about Italy. So anyway, I've loved having you join me. If you're going to watch this back later, as usual, it'll be available immediately. Thank you so much for you guys who joined, and please do send to your friends. I would love you to join me. I'm live every Sunday evening, 8:30. I don't know what time that is in Brazil. I don't know. In the UK, you're maybe a little bit earlier. So maybe it's dinner time on Sunday, but I try and do a Sunday. If I'm unable to do a Sunday, I do Saturday live about the same time. But during the week, go back and look. I'll put the playlist up there. There's a whole playlist that you can watch. Please like the video and please subscribe if you haven't. And thanks for watching. Thanks for joining me. And see you next time. See you on the next one. Bye for now from Italy, from Amanda. Bye. See you next time. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining.